Welcome back to Through the Looking Glass. Today I have Maliha Masood with me. She's one of my oldest friends, and I've asked her to be my co-host for a short series that's going to be released in this segment of my podcast. We have a few different topics that we're going to be speaking about, and today's topic has to do with your career choices and work-life balance, and I have an interesting perspective from her that I want to share with everyone. Hi, Maliha. Welcome.
Hi, Love. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good too. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I know this is a
Of course.
difficult topic to tackle and share, so I'm very proud of you for being here.
Thanks.
The first thing that I want to kind of start off with talking about is so there's balance in general, and we've kind of lived in this very like uncertain period for a while, and there's been lots of ups and downs with working from home and through the COVID years, and just the general shift in the work environment has brought about a lot of changes, and different people have gone through different things. And I know that you have your own story with that. So I think that like what would be cool is to hear a quick summary of your situation with work from the past few years, and just maybe start off with your journey from like undergrad and like tell us where you are now.
All right, so let's dive into it. I'll just tackle the career aspect of it, right? So,
Yeah.
I graduated in 2017, and then I got an offer for a job, and it moved me out to
Hmm.
California, which was amazing, on its own
Hmm.
personal level, but even just professionally, it was very, you throw yourself into the fire and you learn really fast kind of a job. So I
Hmm.
feel like I gained so much experience and knowledge during that time period that I was there. I was there for about 2.5 years. And then I started
Hmm.
talking to my boss about, career growth and trajectory and like what I could do next. And he agreed, like, he felt like, okay, I had learned what I could in this position. And it was time to kind of move on to the next thing that I would want to learn. And so I applied within the company, and thankfully I got the job, like quote unquote promotion, but yeah, so I got it.
Hmm.
And then this job was located in Chicago. So I was in California for 2.5 years, and then I moved to Chicago. So I started then this new job January 2020, and then March hit, and then we were all sent to like work from home. So I
Hmm.
actually moved back to Ohio for a couple months because that's where my parents are from. That's where I went to college and stuff like that. Job wise, it was a very, very, very different and a drastic difference. So my first
Hmm.
job was at a factory. I was a production supervisor. It was very on your feet, fighting fires. Every day is very different, but also very technical because you're working with
Hmm.
machinery and you have goals that you need to reach and stuff like that. And then when I came to my Chicago job, or like my Chicago position, that one was a very like typical corporate desk job. It was in research and development. To be fair, I had like just started, so I wasn't that dived into the lab aspect of things. And I probably would have gotten
Hmm.
more of those experiences or opportunities if COVID hadn't hit. But regardless, it was
Hmm.
a very different structure and environment than what was the other job. So with this job, I felt, I can't quite explain it. It just didn't
Hmm.
feel right for me personally. And there are many
Hmm.
reasons and here and there, but I think when it came down to it, it really affected my mental health in a way that I had never
Hmm.
really quite experienced before that. And so,
Hmm.
you as a person, at least I would hope, like, you hit a wall and you're like, okay, I need to do something. I need to change, or I need to adjust, so that way I'm not miserable all the
Hmm.
time, or I'm not,
Hmm.
suffering. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of what started the trajectory of like me wanting to leave essentially. So,
Hmm.
and I tried everything first. I talked to my boss. We actually had a reorg, kind of like a smaller reorg,
Hmm.
and I got a new boss,
Yeah.
and I worked with him a lot to try and figure out like how to be able to function at my job, because I was giving my
Hmm.
deliverables, but it was taking
Hmm.
everything out of me to be able to do that. And he saw that, and he was like,
Yeah.
listen, here are some options. He even suggested some therapy. And I'm always
Hmm.
open to self improvement. So I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So I tried that as well. And I think
Hmm.
Well, that's a whole side situation where I feel like that wasn't the best fit for me, maybe.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was a good experience because it helped me soothe what I was like feeling in my own head and
Mhm.
know that like it is hard. So,
Mhm.
anyways, I tried to make it like do the decision as smart as I could. I saved up as much as I could. I saved up enough to like survive a year
Mhm.
without having a job and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
then I put my resignation in 10 months into the position.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
this was 2020, October. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's kind of how
Okay.
it went.
Yeah. So there's two things I want to follow up on. So let's go back to like the beginning of when you moved to Chicago, because this was a job that I remember back then that you were really excited to start, and it was,
Right.
the promotion, and it was you were kind of at a point where you were done doing the job that was, had like less of a structured hours back in California, and you wanted something that was more of like a office environment, and it was like checking all the things that you were looking for, right? So at what
Right.
point, once you got there, when you kind of started realizing, wait, it's not for me, and like what were some indicators?
That's a really good question, actually. I don't know that I've thought too much about that part, but
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think working from home
Mm-hmm.
made it more obvious. And I feel like if we weren't working from home, I maybe would not have
Mm-hmm.
noticed what I was feeling or how I was doing as soon as I did, essentially.
Yeah. Right.
Um, I think the bulk of it, like the bulk of the mental health and
Mm-hmm.
the misery, essentially, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word, hit in the
Yeah.
summer. And
Mm-hmm.
so I knew before COVID hit that I wasn't really loving it, but in my head,
Mm-hmm.
you have a plan. I mean, I
Yeah.
for sure did. I had a plan. I was going
Mm-hmm.
to do this job for a year and then
Yeah.
switch out to a different position that aligned more with my goals. I feel
Right.
like I thrive in like relationships and people management. And this job was,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, starting out. And so this job was a more scientist role
Mm-hmm.
where I'm doing a lot of other stuff. And so I
Mm-hmm.
knew like I'm going to gain this experience and I want to transfer into something that has a little bit more of what I'm looking for. So
Yeah.
the plan was in place. I knew this wasn't my favorite, but something that, this is where I'm at. I'm going to
Sure.
make the
It
most of
was a
it. I'm going to
stepping
build.
stone for you.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what I felt. But I think once COVID hit, I went home and I started working from
Mm-hmm.
home and I like couldn't get myself to get up and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't get myself to
Mm-hmm.
send out a simple email that I had already written. It was drafted and ready.
Yeah.
I just couldn't
Yeah.
send it. I don't know. I even worked with my friends for a little bit and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I'm like struggling over here. So she called me over. She helped
Mm-hmm.
me map everything out, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It was just weird. And I remember talking to you about this actually. I was like, hey,
Yeah.
how are you guys doing work from home? Like,
Yeah.
are you not able to get up in the morning or are
Yeah.
you not able to send the email? And I mean, you and I talked to you and Bolivi and your answers
Yeah.
were just normal, but I think mine were just on the extreme end, maybe.
Right.
So that kind of
That
like started that cycle.
comparison was a good indicator. Because I remember those
Yeah.
conversations when, that during that year when we had about work, and, just to give everyone context to like what I was doing, I was, like somewhat of like an early level engineer at that point. My job was very like analysis based, and luckily, like for me, I had moved to California in 2019, and I had built up a good relationship with my team at that time. So it was nice to have like friendly faces come on during those calls, and we all had like a close team relationship. So it felt like, your work family that you were talking to every day. So it's like comforting, because at that time I didn't have any family in California. Because I had moved here for work, and I had my roommate and like a few friends, and that was kind of the extent of my circle. So it was very isolating in that way. But work was, like a place that I felt safe at that time, and it was easy for me in the sense to like get things done. And I remember I would, because it was such an analysis based job, and I would like run all these like calculations or like reports and things, and I'd like start off and like let it run, and I'd like run around the kitchen like dancing, and like I'd like make like an elaborate lunch, and I was like, oh my God, I have time to make like lunch, and I'm like cooking lunch. It was like, even though it was like miserable in like every aspect as a society that we're dealing with all of it, I was able to like escape into my own bubble with work from home and just make it
Mhm.
work, because like 2020, like we weren't really allowed to go anywhere, so it's I had to find like the joy that I could in those small things, whether it was making, an elaborate lunch or like talking to my coworkers and things like that. So when you were asking me those questions about, how work from home is like affecting you, it was a
Right.
very different thing where like I had adapted to like survive within that somehow. And I don't want to speak for Pallavi, but I can imagine that she would have somewhat of a similar answer. Um, versus like you knew that this was something that was like physically difficult for you to do in terms of being able to like be present and like show up for these meetings and not have it be this like mental drag for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was going to be my question for you actually. Like, how do you think COVID
Yeah.
helped you? So if you have to add
hmm
to that, like, how do you think COVID helped or hurt your career
Yeah.
trajectory?
I think it stagnated. And I remember my manager at that time, he would say that by the time I had left that role, I was in that role for 2.5 years, like pushing 3 years
Mm,
almost. And I remember when I was having those conversations with him about my next position, he said that like, oh, I always thought like, you would move on after a year. Because like he knew that I would be like ready to go do something else and be bored.
right.
But because of like everything being dragged out with COVID, and I had this like position where I had extreme job safety, it was like one of the best places to be within the situation of like getting laid off and all of the things that were
Right.
going on in the work environment. So it just was not a good time for me to move in terms of, career trajectory. So it did stagnate me a ton for a while. But, at this point, like, so did everybody else's career, right? Like it did stagnate for a
Fair.
couple of years. So ultimately, like, we're all in the same place, comparatively. So I don't know. I feel like at the end of the day, I'm sure it felt like a drag at that time, but now that we're like a few years past it, it doesn't, I'm not like sad about it, like worried about it at this point because I know I'm moving towards what I want to do next.
Nice. Nice. Cool.
So I want to know one more thing that I forgot to like
Yeah.
follow up on about the time when before you put your resignation in and things like that. I know you said that you took lots of steps, including, talking to a therapist and like your manager was working with you and all these things. If you could like think, I know it's like hard to imagine because that's not what happened. But say COVID didn't happen, do you think the
Mhm.
same decision would have come about? Like if you stayed in Chicago
Hmm.
and you were, COVID didn't happen and you were just going to the office, would you have still felt like that job wasn't a right fit for you?
Um, I think so. Yes. And I think I had
Mm-hmm.
started to feel that already because once I would get
Yeah.
to work, I would definitely try and find my space there. And I feel like, especially with my California job, it was so much tougher. So when I came here in my head, it was like, okay, this is going to be really hard. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to have to get through it. And it wasn't like,
Yeah.
thankfully, it was smooth sailing for the most part, other than the fact that I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't like get myself to
Yeah.
do something or for some reason. But I think I knew that this is not what I wanted to, which is why I had the
Mm-hmm.
plan in place, right? I
Yeah.
had started taking an AWS course for cloud computing, and I had
Mm-hmm.
started looking into different MBA programs because at that time I wanted to really look down that route, more of a
Yeah.
managerial kind of businessy route.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had that plan in place. I think without COVID, I may not have quit, I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
but I genuinely knew that this wasn't the role for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like it kind of expedited the process of like you need to
Yeah.
make that change. So that makes me want to get into, the period after you resigned. Do you feel like you regretted that decision in terms of the way that things have turned out and like all the things that you got to do versus didn't get to do?
That's a really good question. I think I want to like preface this with two things that always come to
Yeah.
mind when I think
Mm-hmm.
about it, and then I'll tell you what I actually feel. But
Yes.
the first thing
Yes.
was I remember, okay, so the first thing was that I remember my dad telling me, like,
Mm-hmm.
he calls me beta, which means, child in Urdu,
Yeah.
but he's like,
Yeah.
beta, I don't know that this is a good decision or this is the smartest decision. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I know, Dad, but I am like struggling. He's like, if you want to leave, that's fine, but you should
Mm-hmm.
secure another job before you do that. And
Yeah.
now in hindsight, obviously that was the decision to, like, that was the way
Yeah.
to do it, and that's pretty
Mhm.
common sense, and it's good work practice as well, and security, like job security as well. However,
Mhm.
I think I was in such a state at that point. I often think about this. I'm like, should I have done that, or would I have
Mhm.
been able to do that? And I think I was struggling so much with quote unquote making ends meet just at work that I didn't
Mhm.
have any time to put into also getting a job search in, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's my appease, because I remember staying up till 2 a.m., 3 a.m. trying to get emails out, trying to do something. And I'm not one of those that sends the
Mhm.
email at 3. I would like schedule for the morning. So just let's
Yeah.
not keep it toxic. But you know, like I'm sitting up late and doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
So I remember like I genuinely had no time to put into
Mhm.
a separate job search as well. So I think that appeases me
Mhm.
a little bit, knowing that I was doing all I could. And then the
Mhm.
second thing I thought about, and this actually I talked to Olivia a lot about, especially when she changed her job, and the
Mhm.
conversations around how like the first year is always the toughest. And it's a lot of
Right.
acclimation. It's a new job role. It's a new company.
Mhm.
So I do think sometimes if I, you know, maybe if I had made it through the first year, would it have been different? But
Right.
like you said, that's a lot of what ifs to think about, you know, and
Yeah.
I know the mental state that I was in at that time. And, you know, thankfully I was
Mhm.
grateful that I had never felt that way before. So when I did feel it, I
Yeah.
was like, oh no, this
Yeah.
isn't it. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, in short, I do consider like maybe could I have done it in a more practical way? Maybe, but I don't
Mhm.
regret it. And I think
Yeah.
like we've talked about before, it did give me so many other opportunities outside of just my career growth necessarily, that I can't
Mhm.
regret it, you know? And this is
Yeah.
like a side thing, but
Yeah.
I'm a very like faith and emotion based decision maker. I'm an
Yeah.
engineer at heart. I think things through logically, and I have a
Yeah.
pro and con list and everything. But once I've done
Mhm.
that, the final decision is based on what I feel is right.
Yeah.
Not like, even if the pro con list was in a different way, I'd be like, okay, that's
Mhm.
fine. But in my gut, in my heart, I know this
Yeah.
is how I want to
Yeah.
act. So I do that.
Mhm.
But I think that's what steered me. But that's actually
Mhm.
a question I kind of want to ask you. How do you make your
Yeah.
decisions, especially like your career
Mhm.
decisions?
Yeah. See, that's a tough one because I think that, the gut instinct is always there and I do listen to it, but when it comes to my career, it is very much like more analytical in terms of, this is the right move, like this is the right balance of what I want to do, and like this is a stepping stone, and looking for things that, fulfill like the basic requirements that I need, but also, has some like progression in the direction that I want it to be. But at the same time, it is a difficult situation because your work can affect your personal life too, right? So I,
Yeah.
kind of like what you mentioned, the first year is the hardest, and I
Hmm.
just, got past my first year at a new company, and leaving that previous company was a very difficult move for me. But I think even though I'm saying like I make these decisions analytically, I think I just knew instinctually that it was time for me to be, like almost like kicked out of the nest and like go to a different company in a way. And I had to push myself and like trust that instinct because I could have stayed,
Right.
like no one was making me leave, and like I could have just stayed at the same level and like not progressed, right? Like
Right.
I think personal decisions is like very much like instinct based, like you had mentioned, but
Hmm.
I think work decisions become more difficult because there's just more tangible factors. So I do think about
Right.
that, but I think when it comes down to like the final, like if you're on the fence, then it goes down to like your gut feeling on like what you want to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do things like, like this whole like podcasting experience, that's something that I'm just choosing to do, right? Like that's out of my own interest and that's out of me following my own, like creative path that I'm figuring out for myself. Like no one is telling me like, oh, this is the right time to do it. I think like over time, your instinct is something that is like it's kind of like you're sharpening that skill. And I think when
Yeah.
you are making those instinctual decisions, you are factoring real life factors and factoring in like analytical things,
Yeah,
but maybe
for
you
sure.
just don't know how to articulate it and you don't have an explanation, but you just have a feeling because you just know that this is the right thing for you. And you do have to listen to it.
I actually like the fact you made about like kind of honing or
Hmm.
sharpening your instinctual
Yeah.
skills, because sometimes when you make a decision and even though your gut's telling you no, but you choose the other decision, and it could be something
Yeah.
small like
Yeah.
buying the wrong shirt or choosing the wrong seat at a restaurant,
Yeah.
like nothing too deep. But
Yeah.
even then you feel it like, oh man, I should have done what I was feeling. Like I should have done what my gut was telling me. And I think
Yeah.
it's so important that if we sharpen those skills, hopefully they can bleed into the rest of our life where we're making,
Mm-hmm.
tougher decisions. And if we follow our gut, the hope
Mm-hmm.
is that they turn out
Yeah.
good for you, you know?
Yeah. If you think about it, there's always like, oh, I hope I'm doing the right thing. And of course, there's self-doubt that creeps in. That happens
Of
to
course.
everybody. But, you do kind of have to like let the path unfold for yourself. So while you're on that journey, there's always like that comparison monster that pokes its head, right? So how do you deal with comparison, especially because you had like resigned your job at that time and, since then done different things and tried different things, and I'm sure all of your friends are on different paths, and it can be difficult when you're comparing, quote unquote, and like, seeing what other people are doing, and maybe someone else is on a different timeline. How do you deal with navigating all of that?
Oh man, that was really hard. I think
Yeah.
other than like comparison, I think it was also like an
Hmm.
identity crisis, you could
Yeah.
say, because a lot
Hmm.
of, I didn't even realize this and I noticed it a lot more, especially now that I've like gone through it
Hmm.
essentially, but a lot of us tie our jobs to part of our identity. And they are, like,
Hmm.
I'm not saying they're not, but we give them a lot more weight than we should. And so I remember if you had asked me while I was still working, like, oh, what do you do? I would very proudly say like, oh, I do this. I work for this company. This
Yeah.
is my job. And
Yeah.
as you should, like you put a lot of work in and put a lot of
Hmm.
effort in. But when you're not doing that anymore, you have to remind yourself that just because you're not doing that doesn't mean you're not inadequate
Yeah.
or you're
Yeah.
not enough or something. So that was a very
Yeah.
interesting struggle because I remember I would shy away from social interactions, at least in my head,
Hmm.
where it would come up like, oh, what are you doing? I just wouldn't want to
Yeah.
answer it because
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing and
Hmm.
I didn't get it. And like you said, like everyone around me was on different paths and they were
Yeah.
on good paths. And it just made me think like, okay, what do I want? I think more than
Yeah.
for me, comparison thankfully hasn't been as hard of a thing to deal with because
Hmm.
I wasn't even able to get past the first marker of what I even wanted. Maybe if I knew
Yeah.
what I wanted, then the comparison would hit me more because then I'd be like, well, they have it and I've been
Hmm.
trying for so hard and I wasn't able to get it. I definitely think that would have been more
Hmm.
prevalent. But because I didn't know, it
Yeah.
didn't, like, that was a whole abyss or a whole, like, sea in
Hmm.
itself that trying to figure out what I wanted. But I think what
Yeah.
helped me get out of, like, being down in the dumps maybe about it was
Hmm.
kind of recognizing what I was feeling. I feel like it was definitely some burnout. And yeah, some
Hmm.
people be like, what do you have to be burnt out about? But everyone knows
Yeah.
and everyone goes through their
Yeah.
own things. And
Hmm.
I feel like since college started, you know, I had worked two jobs during college and stuff like that. And so for me, it was
Yeah.
just years and years, like almost 7 years of
Hmm.
just go, go, go. And so
Yeah.
it, just finally caught up to me the second
Hmm.
my body and my brain and my heart realized, okay,
Hmm.
you've been doing go, 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 but this is the first time you've encountered something that you don't actually care that much about, or you don't see
Right.
an end goal to. It was like, okay, we're stopping the engines, so I think
Hmm.
about that a lot because it's not like I haven't met hard times or not had to
Yeah.
struggle or work hard, but like what was different about this? So that was like an interesting
Hmm.
realization. I think once I got past the burnout,
Yeah.
I I realized how much I actually got to do because I was not working a full-time 9 to 5 kind of position. So,
Yeah.
as you know, I got to travel so much in these
Yeah.
last 2 years. Obviously,
Hmm.
post-COVID, once the vaccines were in and stuff, but
Yeah.
it was amazing. And like just the flexibility that
Hmm.
my current position gave me, I'm working part time from home,
Yeah.
and then I ramped it
Hmm.
up to full time, but it was still from home. And so for me, that flexibility really allowed me to go do the things that I was passionate about. I took a bunch of different classes and courses
Hmm.
and tried to figure out what I wanted to do. So I can't
Yeah.
discount that it gave me that opportunity at
Hmm.
all. And
Right.
I've had my
Hmm.
family with me through it all, and it's been nice.
Yeah.
It's been nice being home and recreating these
Hmm.
relationships with my siblings and my
Yeah.
parents as an adult. that I wouldn't have gotten
Mm-hmm.
the chance to otherwise. So,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
I think,
So before we get into the relationships aspect of it, I want to go back and kind of summarize a little bit because I know you hit on it, but what are some actionable things that people can do when they're dealing with those moments of comparison or they're dealing with just navigating, like figuring out your next move?
I think the first thing is to look
Mm-hmm.
inward. What we don't
Mm-hmm.
realize is that everyone is
Mm-hmm.
going through something, and it's always
Yeah.
something that seems insurmountable to them. So they may
Mm-hmm.
look like they have the job that you want, but you don't know what's going on otherwise in their life. So
Yeah.
it's never just a clear cut picture. So that really helped me, is just to look inward and figure out what I needed. I think
Mm-hmm.
personally for me, another thing that was great was, or that helped at least, was kind of
Mm-hmm.
reframing my mindset. And so
Mm-hmm.
reframing it to, okay, I did what I needed to, and I'm going to keep doing what I need to get to where I want. But nobody
Mm-hmm.
else can make those decisions for me, and nobody else can do the work for me. So focusing inward really helped. And I think this part's hard. It doesn't come maybe as
Yeah.
easily, but
Mm-hmm.
being there for the people in the way that you can. So
Mm-hmm.
still celebrating their successes and helping them when they need help, or being there for them, because I think that keeps you a genuine and honest person.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can keep on
Yeah.
to that, that should help you through hard times. You stay true to
Mm-hmm.
yourself instead of later on look back and feel like you didn't do all that you could. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And a lot of this comes in hindsight. It's not while you're going through
Yeah.
it, because while
No,
you're going through
100%.
it,
Yeah. But it's a great
it
reminder for
sucks.
someone who's going through it now because they might hear this and
Definitely.
you never know how that's going to help someone. And you're right, like when you're going through it, of course, you're in the turmoil of all of it, but
Yeah.
looking back, there's definitely wisdom. So I want to get
Yeah.
into your like whole situation with you being able to do different things, especially with travel. I know there's like specific things that you were able to attend, like weddings and stuff like that. And we've talked about this before too, where there's always this like weird balance of it of like when you have a job and obviously you're making money, but there's only so much PTO that you have and there's only so much flexibility that you have to be able to like take long periods of time off to attend weddings or go to, you know, go on these trips and things like that. But the
Right.
other side of it is like when you're doing something part-time or you know, figuring out your next path, you have the time and the ability to like be physically and mentally present to enjoy those experiences, especially when it comes to travel and you know, family things that you want to attend without having those like distractions of work or like, oh, I have to get back before Monday and like all these things. And it's just this double-edged sword, right? Like you can't win with
Yeah.
either situation. So I want to like know about how you feel about your situations of like being able to travel and like the positives and negatives of it that you've dealt with.
Hmm. I think there are a couple negatives to this. So we're going to do the negatives first,
Yeah.
so that way we can
Yeah.
finish on this like segment
Yeah,
part on a high
positivity.
note.
Yeah.
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 So,
Mhm.
the negatives are, it is hard. I
Mhm.
think we as humans, especially if you know,
Mhm.
even as kids, like we go to school. So we look
Yeah.
forward to summer vacation every single year, right? And then you
Mhm.
start working, and then you look forward to your holidays, and you look forward
Mhm.
to a day off or PTO or an event or something. We're
Yeah.
always looking to the next thing. And I think that's human
Mhm.
nature for the most part. And so
Mhm.
when that's taking it away from you, I think that was a really harsh reality where the days just
Mhm.
seemed to blur together. It didn't seem like
Yeah.
I'm working towards anything. Even if I'm taking a course or a class, I don't know
Mhm.
that it would, like, it's not anything serious. It's not anything too structured.
Mhm.
So it felt almost like I was wasting my time away?
Mhm.
And so this
Yeah.
is kind of what I meant about with earlier when I said the reframing thing. You really have to reframe those moments in your head, because I struggled, and this is something I struggled with, which is why I'm saying I'm nowhere
Mhm.
near perfect at it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I I really struggled with being okay with where I'm at, and
Yeah.
especially because you
Mhm.
have a plan, and in your head you're like, okay, by the time I'm, let's say, 35, I'm
Mhm.
going to be in this
Yeah.
position, have this house, have
Yeah.
this family, and
Yeah.
it really rocks your world. So I think the readjustment and the reframing is really hard,
Mhm.
and the day to day is hard, because
Mhm.
you want to put the work in,
Mhm.
but it's hard to, because you don't even know what to put in. You know, you can apply for
Yeah.
jobs and then you
Yeah.
just have to wait. You're at the mercy of others. And
Mhm.
so just the monotony and the kind of like, you could say it becomes a little, you start feeling a little hopeless. So that part is really hard to
Mhm.
get past.
Yeah.
I think the traveling bit really helped me because it gave
Mhm.
me something to look forward to and it gave me something to work towards. So,
Yeah.
like I mentioned, I did a part-time job. So I teach online and it's really flexible. It's
Mhm.
really nice because I can adjust my students here and there. I still feel fulfilled
Mhm.
because I'm helping people and stuff. Like it
Mhm.
was something that I enjoy
Yeah.
doing. So I'm glad I found something like that. But it gave me then purpose because I was like, okay, this next trip is coming up. Let's pick up a couple more
Mhm.
sessions, a couple more students, help them
Mhm.
figure this out and like, you know, kind of save up for something that I want to do. So
Yeah.
I think that was like the brightness in the storm kind of thing where even though
Yeah.
personally maybe I'm not able to do what I need to, you know, I'm
Mhm.
able to go to my friends' weddings that I never thought I would be able to attend, or, you know,
Yeah.
I spent I think it was about a month in California. I spent one of those weeks with you
Mhm.
and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So just being
Yeah.
able to kind of couch surf essentially with your friends,
Yeah.
meet them in cool places and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's really nice to be able to do that. And I think that was kind of the saving grace of the
Yeah.
downside of not having a
Yeah.
job, especially during a financially unstable
Mhm. Right.
time in the world.
Yeah, totally. And it's not even about like whether or not you have a professional job or not. Like everyone was
Right.
going through some of that instability, right? Like it doesn't
Exactly.
ultimately like everyone has their own problem, like you said, and kind of reminds me of like the time when like my whole family was going to India, but I didn't get to go because I
Yeah.
just had so many things on my plate. And even now I feel like a little sad about it, but it was like one of those moments where, you could be on the other spectrum of just working so much that you lose sight of why you're doing it, and
Yeah.
you kind of question yourself of like, I have the money to go on this trip, but like, why am I not
Yeah.
going? It's what
Exactly.
is the benefit that's outweighing to like not go and be with your family or like to see your, grandparents and things like that, right? So it's just this very difficult feeling to navigate when you are in this situation with being able to balance life and work. And it is difficult no matter what you're dealing with. And I would remember like how you mentioned like the couch surfing. I would just feel like I wish I could just go with you like the whole time. Like it was just like, such a fun time to have you over, or like, knowing that you were able to like go to like certain weddings and like certain trips. And I was just like, I wish I was there too. Like, you just want to be with your friends and have fun. And it can
Exactly.
be difficult to like motivate yourself back home when you know, have to do these things where, whether it's like showing up at your job, and it can be difficult. And I think at that time I was already in my MBA program, so I had, you know, uh, things that motivated me to have purpose in terms of, okay, I'm dedicating time to getting this degree because this is, ultimately something that I want to have under my belt, right? So,
Right.
but then it required sacrifices like not being able to travel for weeks, right? So
Yeah.
it was just one of those things where you have to stay in touch with what you ultimately are trying to do and gear everything that you're doing on the day to day towards your long term goals. And if it's not aligning, and that's when you need to figure out how to get back into alignment or set goals that where you can feel like you're serving a purpose, right? So, and
Right.
that's so easy to just sit here and say that, but it's extremely difficult to execute. So we
I
understand.
agree.
We've both struggled in like different ways.
Agreed. And I think that's such a well, like a good way to put the work-life balance struggle where it's like
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the money and you want to do things versus when you have the money but you don't have the time to do the things. And
Yeah.
so it's such an interesting situation. Do you feel like
Mm-hmm.
because you were,
Mm-hmm.
working and I mean that's the standard, right? Like you are like
Yeah.
people are working in general.
Yeah.
But do you think that you
Mm-hmm.
missed out on opportunities other than travel? Because I know that is a very
Mm-hmm.
obvious thing that people do miss out
Yeah.
on. But
Right.
missed out on opportunities because you had the more traditional
Mm-hmm.
9 to 5 job setup?
Right. So I think that that's an interesting question, and I'm thinking, how I can answer that, because there's always going to be something that you miss out on, and even if it's as simple as like, going on like a weekend trip or something like that, right? And it's so hard because, you have to think about like, am I going to feel like I didn't get to do something 5 years into the future, 10 years into
Yeah.
the future, like what is going to actually matter? Like for me, that first year of my MBA was when I had three weddings to go to, or like three wedding related events that no, it was three weddings technically, um, to go to. And I think I would be like heartsick if I didn't get to go to any of those weddings,
Right.
but I knew I had to make it work, and I did. Like, I'm sure some of those events, like you were there too, and I'd be sitting there and doing homework for like, part of the events, but that's just what I had to do for me to like make sure that I was able to like attend the wedding, but also stay on top of my courses.
Right.
And that was a choice, and I made it work. And I think I would be sad if I didn't make it work and like
Hmm.
have that be the reason why I didn't go to the wedding was because I had classes or something, right? Like I would
Right.
regret having that as an answer. So I think it depends on the individual situation, and you have to think about if you're going to be, you know, if you're going to regret missing something because of like a short-term obstacle. And to me, I think there's always a way, there's always a solution. You just have to see it and make it work. And sometimes maybe that even comes down to saying that, to your boss, hey, I really need this like Friday off. Like, I don't care, like find someone else to backfill me. Like
Yeah.
maybe it is like, speaking up in that way. In other ways, it's like you're going to the event, but like maybe you're doing homework on the flight. Like whatever it is, like I think you just have to figure out fits the situation. But I don't know. To me, I think about like the regret thing more as like a indicator of like if I really need to do something, that's how I know that I have to make it work.
I like that. I think that's a personal motto for me as well, to not
Yeah.
regret things. So you give
Hmm.
your all. If you know that you're going to regret it, then you
Yeah.
give your all to make it work.
So I know that, we've hit on a few different things in terms of the different aspects of struggling with your work and balancing life, whether it comes to making the decision to resign your job or making the decision to focus on work and education, or making those decisions of traveling and finding your next move. And maybe
Right.
sometimes having a part time job is the right decision for you, and navigating all of that. It's definitely part of what it is to be in your 20s. And that's
Yeah.
something that everyone has dealt with in some ways. And there's always the negativity of comparing yourself to someone else, and that's only going to maybe even negatively affect you. But understanding that there's a different problem that everyone else is dealing with, and there's something that you can
Yeah.
always learn from someone else. And there's so many things that we could go on and like dig deeper into when it comes to work-life balance. But I think we hit on a lot of interesting snippets of wisdom, especially from Maliha. I want to give you a chance to, is there anything that you want to add that comes to mind that we haven't already talked about in terms of work-life balance that you want to share with everyone?
Definitely. I think maybe that we have touched upon it. I just want to highlight them a little bit.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think one thing is, if you are feeling the, like you mentioned, comparison monster,
Yeah. Yeah.
to really focus inward and then kind of
Mhm.
tie it in with positivity. Because in the beginning, at least personally, I would definitely
Mhm.
think,
Yeah.
oh man, I don't have a job, or
Mhm.
I don't have the career that I thought I would, or nothing's
Yeah.
working out, because I have been applying for like almost a year now.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
all those thoughts are still there, but I kind of
Mhm.
reframed it to focus on, oh my God, I got to travel here.
Mhm.
Oh my God, I got to go here
Yeah.
for a month.
Yes.
Oh my God, this gave me the
Yeah.
opportunity to
Mhm.
take this seminar. I really enjoy teaching, so I was able to teach summer
Mhm.
school this year, which was so much fun. And
Yeah.
so those are things
Yeah.
I would not have been able to do if I had a traditional job. And my work
Mhm.
these days allows me that. But I could have very easily been looking at it on a
Mhm.
negative side. So
Yeah.
because I'm someone who saw it from the negative side and then switched over to the positive side, I can
Mhm.
guarantee you, like, your life is better on the other side.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to kind of pick
Mhm.
it. It doesn't negate your struggles at all, and it
Mhm.
doesn't downplay all the work and the effort you're putting in, but it
Mhm.
makes it easier for you to get through. And that's
Yeah.
just been my personal experience on it.
No, I love that. And I think flipping the narrative and looking at the positive, that's a great takeaway from this whole discussion here. I really do love that. And I think that one of the things that, we want to maybe end on is definitely staying positive and looking at the benefits of like something that you're doing, and to remember that there's no such thing as a traditional path anymore, and it's okay to define your own
Yeah.
path and try different things. And that's what, your 20s and 30s are for. It's never too late to switch your career path, even if you're well into your 30s. There's so much that, our life is meant to accomplish, and I don't think our purpose as a society is to have one job from like out of college until you retire. So it's easy, and like
Yeah.
it's okay to make those changes, and I think it's something that doesn't get spoken about very often. So we definitely want to share our experiences with dealing with those situations and the ups and downs of balancing everything and making the right choice for you, and making the ultimate positive thing that's going to come out of it is like you're on the path where you're finding purpose. And I hope that, if anyone is feeling like they don't have their purpose right now, I promise that it's out there. You just have to figure it out, and you will. So we just want to send out encouragement and positivity to everybody.
Yes, and lots of love and support through tough times,
Yeah.
because it does get better.
Yeah, it does get better. We can
Yeah.
definitely attest to that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maliha, for coming on. I love you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you.
Oh God, I appreciate you too. Thanks for having me, and thanks for treating this vulnerable topic so kindly and gently.
I got you, always.